My son whispered something last night, and even now the words echo inside me as if the walls themselves memorized them. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it, quiet but firm, like he was afraid the night might take his voice before it reached me. I knew in that moment it would be one of those memories that stays, the kind you carry for years, pulling it out whenever you need reminding of what truly matters. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was late evening, and the house had that hush it only gets once the day has put itself to bed. The dishes were done, the faint scent of lemon soap still lingering in the kitchen air, and the old clock above the stove ticked in its patient rhythm. I had just settled on the couch, a soft blanket over my lap, with the lamplight turning the living room into a small golden corner against the vast dark outside. There's something about that hour, when the world seems to exhale and everything waits quietly, that makes your mind wander back through the years. I was flipping through an old magazine I'd read a dozen times before, not really paying attention, when I heard the gentle creak of the stairs. Even my son was coming down. He's a young man now, taller than me by a head, his voice deeper, his stride longer, but still, when I see him padding into the room in his worn socks, I catch glimpses of the boy who once clutched my hand tightly on his first day of school. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked him, setting the magazine aside. He shrugged, though I could tell from the look in his eyes that something heavier than sleeplessness had followed him down the stairs. His shoulders carried it, his hands fidgeted with it, and his silence wrapped around it like paper around a gift. I motioned for him to sit beside me, and he did, though not all the way back into the cushions. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, as if bracing himself. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet we'd grown used to over the years, the kind that holds space for words to arrive whenever they're ready. Since his father and I parted ways years ago, Even and I had built our own rhythm of communication, one where patience was as important as the words themselves. I'd always tried not to rush him, letting him find his own pace, because sometimes the heart takes longer to translate than the mouth. He turned toward me finally, and his eyes caught the lamplight. There was something in them, hesitation, yes, but also determination. He was working up the courage to let something go, and I felt my own chest tighten in anticipation. "Mom," he said softly, "do you remember when I was little? And you tell me those bedtime stories. The ones about the lake where Grandpa used to fish, and the way the sun looked setting on the water." I smiled, the memory flooding me with warmth. I used to make those stories up, stringing together bits of truth with a mother's imagination, trying to comfort him on nights when he was restless. Of course I remember. I told him. "You'd always ask me to tell the one about the fish that got away." He let out a small laugh, but his smile faded quickly. His voice dropped lower, as if he were afraid the walls themselves might overhear. "I miss that," he whispered. "Not just the stories. I miss how safe I felt then, like nothing bad could reach me as long as you were talking." His words pierced me, not in pain, but in the way truth sometimes does, suddenly, deeply, leaving you both humbled and grateful. Here was my son, nearly grown, admitting something most young men keep tucked away, something tender and unguarded. I reached for his hand, laying mine gently over it. His skin was warm, his fingers restless. "Even," I said, "you don't stop being safe just because you've grown taller. My stories may have been about fish and lakes, but the safety you felt wasn't in the words. It was in the love behind them. That hasn't gone anywhere." He nodded, though I could see his throat working as he tried to swallow his emotions. The air in the room felt heavier, thick with unspoken things, and I waited, knowing there was more. He leaned closer, so close I could hear the faint hitch in his breathing, and that's when he whispered the words that stopped me cold, words I knew would never leave me. "I still need you to tell me the stories, Mom," he whispered. "Not about lakes or fish, but about us. About who we are. About how to carry everything we've been through and still keep going." For a moment, the ticking clock was the only sound. My eyes burned, though I tried to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Evan," I said quietly, "I'll tell you every story I can. As long as I'm here, you'll never run out of them." The lamp flickered as the wind rattled a branch against the window, and I felt the weight of the years between us. Every scraped knee I'd kissed, every late-night homework session, every quiet dinner after his father left, all of it converging into this moment. My son wasn't asking for bedtime stories anymore. He was asking for guidance, for history, for roots he could carry into the world beyond this house. We sat together in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full, overflowing with an understanding that needed no further explanation. His hand rested under mine, steady now, and I realized that while he had come seeking comfort, he had also given me something in return. The knowledge that even as children grow into men, their hearts still carry the echoes of home. That night, as I watched him finally relax into the cushions beside me, his eyes growing heavy with the weight of unspoken relief, I promised myself something quietly but firmly. I would not stop telling him the stories. Because stories aren't just words. They are threads that stitch generations together, the light that follows us into the dark, the whispers we carry long after the voices that spoke them are gone. And I knew, without question, that his whisper last night was not just a memory. It was a turning point. The kind that changes how you see the past and how you choose to step into tomorrow. That night after Evan whispered those words, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows shifting with every car that passed outside. His request, so simple, yet so full of meaning, kept looping in my mind. "Tell me the stories, Mom." It wasn't just about bedtime tales or old family recipes. It was about giving him a way to carry our history, our lessons, and our love into the years ahead. That thought both filled me with pride and weighed heavy on me. Could I give him enough? Could I pass on what truly mattered before life carried him farther away? Morning came slow, with the smell of rain drifting through the cracked window. I made coffee, the strong kind I like, and scrambled a couple of eggs. Even wandered down, his hair sticking up like he'd fought a storm in his sleep. He mumbled a good morning, his voice still gravelly, and I watched him pour cereal like he'd been doing since he was 10. For a moment, the ordinary rhythm of the day was comforting. But I knew the night before had changed something between us, and ignoring it would be like pretending spring never follows winter. "Do you remember?" I asked as he sat across from me, "that trip to the cabin by the lake when you were 8? He froze mid-bite, spoon hovering in the air. Then his lips curved into a half-smile. "Yeah, that was the year it rained the whole week. We never even got to swim." I chuckled. "True. But do you remember what you did that last night? When the thunder kept you awake?" His brow furrowed. "Not really. What did I do?" I leaned forward, the steam from my coffee curling between us like a thin veil. "You came into my room, carrying that flashlight shaped like a rocket ship. You climbed under the blankets and said, 'Tell me a story, Mom. Make the thunder stop.' So I told you about Grandpa's fishing trip, the one where the boat almost tipped. You laughed so hard you forgot the storm." His spoon clinked back into the bowl. "I don't remember laughing," he admitted. "But I guess I remember feeling safe. Like the thunder was outside, but we were inside." I nodded. "That's what stories do. They don't erase the storm, but they remind us we're not facing it alone, He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up his glass of milk and swirled it slowly, staring at the tiny whirlpool he made. Finally, he looked up. "Mom, do you think we've had too many storms?" The question landed heavy in the quiet kitchen. Is Father leaving? The nights I worked late just to keep things steady. The silences at the dinner table when words felt too sharp to use. All of it rushed back to me. But I met his gaze without flinching. "We've had our share," I said softly. "But storms shape the ground, even. They carve new rivers, they clear the air. What matters isn't how many storms we've had, but how we've stood through them." He pushed his bowl away and leaned back, his face more serious than I'd seen in a long time. "I don't want to just stand through them anymore. I want to understand them. That's why I asked last night. The stories, they're not just bedtime to me anymore. They're pieces of why we are who we are. And I need that." His words shook something loose inside me. For years, I'd carried the weight of protecting him from pain, softening truths so his world wouldn't feel too heavy. But now he was asking me not to protect him, but to trust him with the truth. "All right," I said, setting down my mug. "If you want the stories, then you'll get them. But they won't all be easy. Some will make you laugh, some might make you angry, and some may make you cry. Are you ready for that?" He didn't hesitate. "I think I am. Because if I don't hear them from you, I'll always feel like I'm missing something." The rain tapped gently on the windows as if agreeing with him. I got up, walked over to the drawer in the dining room, and pulled out an old tin box. It was dented on one side, the paint chipped, but the sound of it opening still carried the same soft click it had when my mother used it. Inside were recipe cards, photographs, and folded notes that smelled faintly of dust and cloves. I carried it to the table and placed it in front of him. "This," I said, "is where the stories begin." He opened the lid carefully, as though he were afraid to disturb the memories inside. He picked up a recipe card, tracing my mother's handwriting with his finger. His eyes softened. "Her dumplings," he whispered, almost to himself. I watched him, my heart swelling with both sorrow and joy. This was the bridge between past and future, between what was carried and what could be shared. "Tonight," I told him, "we'll make her soup. I'll tell you the story of the day she wrote that recipe. And tomorrow, another story. One by one, until you understand that you're not just my son. You're part of a line of people who weathered storms, laughed at mistakes, and left behind more than recipes. They left behind themselves in every word, every meal, every whisper." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw the little boy with the rocket-shaped flashlight. Only now, he wasn't asking me to stop the thunder. He was asking me to teach him how to face it. And I knew, without a doubt, that the stories had only just begun. The kitchen smelled like steam and broth, carrying with it a sweetness that pulled memories from the corners of the house. Even stood beside me, shoulders hunched slightly as he chopped carrots with the careful concentration of someone who didn't want to ruin the moment. The old pot bubbled softly, the sound reminding me of rainy days in my mother's kitchen, where the whole world felt smaller and safer. I had promised him a story with the soup, and as the dumplings floated to the surface, I knew it was time. "Your grandmother," I began, stirring slowly, wasn't the kind of woman who spoke a lot about her feelings. But she had her ways. This soup, it wasn't just food. It was her way of telling us we were safe. That no matter what was happening outside, money troubles, arguments, even wars when she was a little girl, inside these walls we had enough. Even glanced up from the cutting board. His eyes, so like his father's yet softer, searched my face as though he were trying to see the grandmother he barely remembered. "She made this for you when you were a kid." I nodded. Every winter. When the cold cut through our coats, when I came home from school with frozen fingers, she'd be at the stove, stirring. She never said much, but that soup, it warmed more than your hands. I watched his throat move as he swallowed, his knife pausing mid-chop. I wish I remembered her better, he said quietly. I only get flashes. Her humming, the way she smelled like cinnamon sometimes. It feels unfair, Mom. Like I missed knowing her. I set the spoon down and put my hand over his. His skin was rougher now, not the soft little boy's hand I once held, but still carrying the same warmth. You didn't miss knowing her, I said gently. She's here in every story I tell you. In every bite of this soup. People don't disappear when we remember them, even. They just change places, from in front of us to inside us. His eyes glistened, though he blinked quickly. Is that how he felt after Dad left? That he just changed places? The question caught me off guard. My instinct was to brush it aside, to protect him as I always had. But I promised him the truth. No, I said, my voice quieter now. When your father left, it didn't feel like he changed places. It felt like he vanished. Like a room I used to walk into every day was suddenly locked. For a long time, I tried to pretend I still heard his footsteps. I tried to carry the silence alone, so you wouldn't feel its weight. Even set the knife down, his jaw tightening. But I did feel it, he admitted. I just never wanted to say anything. I thought if I did, it would make it worse for you. I felt my chest ache with both guilt and love, and I thought the same for you. Isn't that something? Both of us carrying silence for each other, when what we needed most was to share it. The pot hissed as a bubble burst, breaking the heaviness in the air. Even gave a small laugh, though it was shaky. So you're saying we've been protecting each other from the very thing that could have helped us. I smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. Exactly. That's why the stories matter now. They're not just memories. They're bridges. They let us walk across to each other. He leaned back against the counter, folding his arms. Then tell me another, he said, his voice steadier now. Something real. Something you never told me before. I took a deep breath, the weight of years pressing against my chest. All right. The night before your father left, he sat at this very table. He looked at me, and for the first time, I realized he was already halfway gone. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. But after he left, I sat right here with this same pot of soup, and I made a promise to myself. I promised I would keep the warmth in this house alive for you, even if it meant stirring alone. Evan's lips parted slightly, as though he were going to speak, but no words came out. Finally he whispered, You kept that promise. I always felt it, even when I didn't say so. I turned back to the stove, blinking quickly before the tears spilled. The dumplings were done now, puffed and soft, ready to be served. I ladled the soup into 2 bowls, setting one in front of him. He took it with both hands, breathing in the steam as though it were a prayer. As we ate, the silence between us no longer felt heavy. It felt full, like the pause between verses of a song. Even broke it after a while, his voice low but certain. Mom, when I whispered to you that night, what I really meant was, I don't just need the stories. I need to know how to carry them, how to take them with me when I leave this house one day. I looked at him, spoon poised halfway to my lips. His face was open, vulnerable, but steady. And I realized this was no longer about bedtime comfort or recipes. It was about legacy, about passing down not just memories, but the strength woven into them. You don't carry them alone, I told him. We carry them together. And when you share them with whoever you love, with your children someday, that's when they become lighter. That's how they survive. He nodded slowly, and I could see something shift in his eyes, a new kind of understanding, one that came not from being told, but from being trusted. That night, as we washed the dishes together, the clinking of bowls and the hum of the faucet became a rhythm, almost like music. The house no longer felt filled with echoes of what was missing. It felt alive, pulsing with stories that had finally found their voice. And I knew, as he dried the last bowl and set it gently on the shelf, that his whisper had already begun to change both of us in ways we couldn't yet measure. The days after that night carried a different kind of quiet in the house. Not the heavy kind that once made our footsteps echo too loudly, but a gentle quiet, like the pause between heartbeats. Even moved differently, too. He lingered in the kitchen longer, asked small questions about the past, some about his childhood, some about mine, and listened with an attentiveness that reminded me of the little boy clutching his rocket-shaped flashlight. Only now, it wasn't fear of thunder that brought him closer. It was the need to understand where he came from and where he was going. One evening, a week later, we sat out on the porch. The air was cool, the crickets stitching their endless song across the dark fields, and the old porch light above us swayed slightly with the breeze. Even leaned against the railing, his frame outlined against the twilight. I sat in the rocker with a blanket across my lap, the same one his grandmother had knit decades ago. He looked older in that light, not just taller or broader, but older in a way that startled me, like a man preparing to step into his own life. "Mom," he said, breaking the stillness, "do you ever think about how people will remember you?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples moved through me, carrying pieces of memory and doubt. I thought of the times I'd stumbled as a parent, the moments I wish I could erase, and the countless times I wondered if I'd done enough. But I also thought of the stories, the meals, the nights spent soothing fears, the mornings filled with laughter despite tired eyes. I do, I admitted. Sometimes I worry about what I'll leave behind. Not things you can touch, but things that matter. Will you remember the love more than the mistakes? Will the stories be enough? Even turned then, his expression softened by the golden wash of the porch light. "I think I'll remember both," he said honestly. Because the mistakes make the love real, and the stories, they're not just enough. They're everything. They make me feel like I'm part of something bigger than just me. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. That's all I ever wanted, Ivan. For you to feel connected. For you to know you belong to something that stretches back before us and will stretch forward long after us. He stepped closer, resting his hands on the railing, his voice steady but soft. "That's why I whispered that night, Mom. I didn't know how else to say it. I was afraid you might not hear me if I said it too loud. But I needed you to know. I don't just want the stories, I want to carry them. I want to carry you with me, even when I'm not here." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't heavy with sorrow. They were light, almost like a release. I reached out and took his hand, this time not to steady him, but to steady myself. "Then promise me something," I said quietly. "Promise me you'll keep telling them. To your friends, to the people you love, to your children someday. Promise me you'll keep them alive." He held my hand firmly, his eyes unwavering. "I promise." The moment stretched between us, not fragile but strong, like a bridge that had been rebuilt after years of silence. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of rain, and I realized how far we had come. From whispers in the dark to promises on the porch, we had turned storms into stories, and silence into something full. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought again about his question, how people would remember me. And for the first time in years, the answer didn't frighten me, because I knew, no matter what, my son would carry my stories. He would carry the warmth of soup on a cold night, the lessons hidden in small moments, the love that was never perfect but always present. And perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. Not that I had kept him safe from every storm, but that I had taught him how to walk through the rain with his head high, holding a story in his heart like a lantern. As I drifted toward sleep, I heard his whisper again, softer now, but no less powerful. I still need you to tell me the stories, Mom. Only this time I understood fully. It wasn't just a request. It was a vow, a thread tying us together across time. And I knew, as sure as the sunrise that would come in a few hours, that neither of us would ever walk through life alone again. The stories would walk with us, carrying the past into the future, whisper by whisper, memory by memory, love by love.